Hi, everybody. My name's Colter Pence. I work for the Flathead National Forest. Here, I am a Wilderness, Wild and Scenic Rivers and Trails Program Manager. I'll turn it over to you, Matt.
Yeah, I'm Matt Abel. I currently work for the Washington Office Trails Program. My day job is the Trail Database Modernization Product Owner, but I've also been in acting roles as the Assistant National Trail Program Manager, the Region 8 Trail Program Manager, and the Region 9 Trail Program Manager. But yeah, I have a background in trails my whole career. So happy to be here.
Cool. Okay, let's dive into our content, everybody. So we have three objectives, three things we're going to do in this presentation. First, we're going to ensure our audience is familiar with the competencies that are relevant for trail specialists. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to take a moment to conduct a self-assessment of where your competencies are. We won't be able to finish it. We don't have enough time, but we'll set you up so that you can continue with that activity and unpack it in the timeline that you want. And then the third thing we're going to do, and this is going to be an interactive thing, so get ready to either come off of mute, put your thoughts in the chat. We want to together review and share out resources that you know of on how you can define your training path, your route to acquire some of these skills and competencies. So again, get ready to be brainstorming and sharing back with us. We'll spend more time on that in a moment here. But like I said, these are our three elements here. Okay, so for that first objective, we're going to talk about trail competencies as a concept. And what you're going to see ahead here is a competency is composed of three types of things: knowledge, skill, or ability. Knowledge is like the information that you have, information that you can apply to a situation to perform a task. A skill is like typically a psychomotor type of thing. I know physically how to accomplish this thing. An ability it's a little bit, it's kind of like an assembly of both of those things, skill and knowledge. But really, the ability is the ability to perform a behavior that results in something. So if you wanted to understand the difference between knowledge, skill, and ability, there they are for you. We won't spend a ton of more time parsing out the differences, but you will see knowledge, skill, ability, and concept come up again. So we wanted to address it right out of the chute here. Specific for trail competencies, there's a framework that's been developed about the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed for trail specialists. I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and he's going to, I think, talk a little bit more about the origin story of these competencies.
Yeah, so what we're getting ready to go through was kind of a long time coming. When I was still working on the Daniel Boone National Forest and was the first Region 8 Trail Advisory Group member, there was actually a core competencies framework being developed. At that time, it was MTDC, but was it now NTDP? um, that was kind of being done in a little bit of a silo, and it was I would say it maybe had a little bit of a engineering slant to it and was very detailed and maybe a little too thorough. And um, it was basically everything that you could ever do under a trail position was considered a core competency. And that's kind of not really getting at the core of it, right? If it's everything you might ever do. So that effort ended up being scrapped because it was really just too much information, too many things included in there. And the Trail Advisory Group and the Washington Office Trail Program partnered with the Epley Institute and started to rethink core competencies and how they could be applied. And actually ended up working across jurisdictional boundaries. We pulled in Park Service, BLM, and we partnered really heavily with the Professional Trail Builders Association. And all of those different entities worked together to develop the process. Epley kind of oversaw it. They pulled together a lot of meetings and a lot of um, sort of, I guess, voting, kind of working through it with all these different groups and how we viewed core competencies and what actually was a core competency were compared to stuff that was kind of on the periphery. So it's really a cool process to bring together all these different groups and work through this and talk through all of the we'll call it like language barriers that different agencies and different parts of the country have related to trail work and trail KSAs. So that's kind of how we worked through it. And it was really EPLI and PTBA that helped kind of bring it across the finish line. And then now we have that as a tool that's being used by multiple agencies and universities and different folks as our sort of foundation to those core competencies.
Yeah. A couple other things to know about this framework. Um, if you want to find it, you could Google right now trail competencies. It should be the first one that comes up. It talks about that whole process that Matt referenced of honing and establishing this notion of trail specialists should have these types of skills that translate across different types of workforces in the trails management world. Um, and I also want you to know that there's actually some history with competencies. There's an existing wilderness core competencies framework. There's a river core competency framework. And now those are a little older, especially the wilderness one. It's actually fairly old. And now there's a trails competency list. There's also a ranger competency list. And that comes from the International Ranger Federation. Maybe we will unpack that someday. And for what it's worth, if you find yourself overlapping in the wilderness world or the rivers world, at Wilderness Skills Institute in previous years, we've done this same type of session exploring these competencies for those other ones. So you could look at the back catalog and find some of the other exploration we've done around those other fields. In this case, for trails, there are 6 competencies. We're going to unpack those here in a minute. And they also come at different uh, levels, we'll say. There's entry level, full performance, and expert level. So if you find yourself over the course of your career transitioning from entry to full performance to expert level, you might look at the difference between those competencies to better guide you. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
Colter.
yeah, go ahead.
Going to say, you mentioned those other groups of core competencies, and I think one of the unique things about the Trails core competencies, those other ones were all developed internally, right, just by the
Yeah.
Forest Service, and the Trails core competencies, as I mentioned, really pulled in everybody that deals with trails to try and be a little more broad than just the Forest Service focus.
Yeah. Well, actually, a small correction. I do know the Rivers one was interagency
Oh, nice.
Wild Scenic River Council project. River Management Society helped with it. So it was multifaceted. But I will say the Trails one, my understanding, learning from you and the report, really broad-based user group contributed to it. So it's a shining example for that reason. Okay. Matt, any last thought here before we start diving into the competencies themselves?
Good to go.
Okay. Um, okay, so we're going to start looking at them. Like I said, there's 6 clusters. And then within the clusters, um, there are subheaders. Um, and so you'll see trail construction, trail maintenance, project preparation as 3 of the 6. We'll look at the next 3 in a minute here. And then under trail construction, you can see there's 11 components within trail construction. Construction specifics, corridor clearing, hand-built trail construction versus mechanical trail construction, trail finish work, water management. I'm not going to read it all, but you can sort of see that it's going through all the phases, we'll say, and the variations of trail construction. Trail maintenance is similarly broke down in some good refined details, project preparation, and I think this is really savvy. I like how this is done in the framework. Land use plan alignment, acknowledging that we all, as trail specialists, need to have knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to navigate, well, what is the land management plan for where we think this trail might go? How do we make it align with the existing plans? Also, stakeholder engagement when you're preparing a project, a trails project. There's I think, some savvy identification of project preparation that's well done in here. Matt, would you say anything about anything that stands out to you here under these headers?
I just appreciate that they are thorough and that you can kind of break down each of the 6 categories has individual topics that kind of cover the whole gamut of it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're going to look at the next 3 here, an overview. So this is the second set of the total of 6, project planning and design, when you're actually really starting to get into the weeds. Project and crew management. We can talk about all the technical aspects of trail maintenance, trail construction, but also how are you going to manage the people, right? job site safety, job site risk management, field-based resource protection, and then that last one, program administration and leadership. I love that we're talking about that leadership is a knowledge, skill, and ability that we want to encourage people to explore and develop themselves with in the trails world. Um, and in fact, number 10 stands out to me right now, agreement development. Certainly in the Forest Service, but I don't think we're unique in this. The number of collaborators and partners that can come to bear for any trails project typically involves an agreement, an MOU, some kind of formalization of what's going to be offered. I think this is savvy to identify the knowledge, skill, and ability to work with agreements when you're preparing for a trails project. Trails management is something that we all should be not have that capacity around. Matt, is there anything you would point to here?
Yeah, I just really like that. A lot of us, when we think of trail skills, we immediately go to the hard skills of like digging in the dirt and moving rocks and building bridges and stuff. And I appreciate that this framework talks about planning, talks about crew management, talks about admin and leadership, because there's so much more that goes into it than just the work on the ground. And so being well rounded and aware that all of that goes into the trail work that does happen on the ground, I think is a really good call.
Cool. So we just did an overview here. There's these 6 clusters of knowledge, skills, and competencies, and then the knowledge, skills, and abilities underneath them. What Matt just said is perfect. It's sort of a list of things that are as well-rounded. We acknowledge all of the hard skills, but we're also acknowledging in this framework that there are leadership elements, administration elements that will help make you a more savvy trail specialist. And so this starts to become a little bit of a list for you to work on to acquire these knowledge, skills, and abilities. Maybe you are really strong in one area. Maybe you need a little more work in another area, or a little more training, a little more mentorship. That's the point of all of this. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide here. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a little time to start assessing your own trails management competencies. Okay, I've shared in the chat um, the all of those. It's a worksheet. I've shared in the chat a worksheet for you to download right now. Um, and what we'd like you to do is review it and use it as a self-assessment. You can rate yourself on this worksheet under the various knowledge, skills, and abilities of having, nope, I don't know anything about this, don't have any skills. And that likely becomes a priority for you at some point to start acquiring things. On the other end of the scale, you might rate yourself as very experienced and super knowledge about this knowledge, skill, and ability. Not to say that you don't have more to learn, but that you can actually maybe offer yourself as a mentor, a coach, an instructor. And this is just meant to give you a place to assess yourself of where you are. As you're working through this worksheet, will you also jot down places where you know that if you know of them, where you can acquire some of these knowledge, skills, and abilities. If you're really skilled in something, where did you get that skill from? How did you learn that? Did you take a class? Did you read a book? Did you find some written guidelines somewhere? Um, did you attend a workshop? We'd like you to jot that down to the best of your ability because we would like to share that after we do this brainstorm here for a minute. Matt, would you say anything before we do a moment of silence here?
Yeah, I'd just say like when you're doing this, be honest with yourself. It doesn't really do any good to like overinflate your skills or think that you're maybe better in something than you actually are. That doesn't give you as much room to grow. It also could come back to bite you if you say you're an expert in something and somebody reaches out and asks you to teach a training and you realize, oh, maybe I'm not really ready to teach a training on that. So kind of just be honest with yourself. And I'll also just say like, I've got over 20 years of trail experience and I'm learning constantly still. Every time I go out in the field and work on projects, I learn something new. And I think it's really important, especially as you gain more and more skills, to try and keep that beginner's mind frame that there's always more to learn. There's always more to get better at, even if you do rate yourself pretty highly in some of these skill areas. So that's my tips. Just be honest with yourself.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a moment here.
A few minutes later.
I think this activity is best done when you have more time and you can be a little more thorough in your reflection. Um, and I hope you have downloaded this, the two options in the chat so that you can do that. Um, but our goal today is to start that brainstorming and sharing of where you can acquire some of these knowledge, skills, and abilities. Matt and I have done some prep work for that. We're going to go through our list, and at the end, we would like to hear from you in the audience of where you would recommend people could go to. I'm going to take some notes and add that, what you share, to our list. So let your mind wander. And I just learned something this morning that I'm looking forward to telling you guys about. Okay, so we'll start going through the stuff we've prepped here. We're going to share out with each other where you can start acquiring some of these skills or further what you've already started. There's major stuff with the Forest Service. We're just going to use Forest Service examples because that's where Matt and I originate from. I do know there are a number of similar things in the Park Service, BLM, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as well, but we'll just use Forest Service examples. American Trails, they have a ton of training resources, as does the Partnership for National Trails. I also want to encourage you to connect with your local trail stewardship groups. Even if you're in a trail stewardship group, a peer group, or if you're somebody like myself with a agency, reaching out and acquiring knowledge, skills, and abilities from my local trail stewardship group, I can always learn more. I do have things to learn from them. And like I said, we're going to learn from you all in the audience as well. Some of the major Forest Service resources come from our manual and handbook system. Got some of them on the slide here. And a lot of our resources in manual and handbook, not a lot of them, all of them are organized by this numbering system. If you want to find these, you need to use this numbering system. It's sort of like the Dewey Decimal System for the Forest Service. And the big one is in Forest Service Manual 2350. You're going to find a whole lot of stuff that relates to those knowledge, skills, and abilities about how to plan trail projects, how to implement trail projects, trail specifications, design type of stuff. There's also the Trail Management Handbook 2309.18, travel management. This gets a little more into like what we have open for motorized, what we don't have open for motorized, things like that. We both called out like the administrative side of trails work, and that often relates to grants and cooperative agreements. So that's, we're getting out of the trails world specifically, but we're getting into grants and agreements. Forest Service Manual 1580 and Handbook 1509. If you want to exchange resources, funds, in-kind labor, things like that, that's where you find guidelines on doing that. For planning trails projects that might require NEPA or maybe don't, and you just don't want to get to the bottom of that. All of our planning directions are in 1920, 1901. Land ownership type of stuff where we're talking about trails that cross boundaries. You want to look at Forest Service Manual 5400. I'm going to skip down to Health and Safety Handbook, Forest Service Handbook 6709. This is where it tells us all of those ways to be safe in the field, also required trainings for certain things. When you're developing maybe your knowledge as a leader on how to implement a trail project safely or provide training to others, you want to be familiar with what's in our Health and Safety Handbook. I was just talking with someone yesterday about some volunteers, some potential volunteers that want to work with us on our unit here that want to use their motorcycles, and whether they need to have training and be certified to use their motorcycles so they can be volunteers with us was the question. So I'm looking that up in Health and Safety Handbook as an example. If you want to look up the Forest Service directives, there's the website below. Before I move on, Matt, would you say anything about Forest Service Manual and Handbook type of stuff?
They're there. They're available. And I'll also say that one of the great things about AI is that they're also in those, whatever program you use, and you can actually search them and pull stuff out really efficiently with AI. Because if you've seen either the Forest and Service Safety Handbook or the management handbooks, I mean, they're big documents. And so being able to efficiently find the pieces that you want is a nice add with the technology these
Oh my
days.
gosh, Matt, I'm so glad you brought that up. This is not trails specific, but I just gotta tell you about this. Somebody using AI to interpret our Forest Service handbook. This just happened to us the other day. This was an outfitter and guide issue, so different section, 2720, I think. And one of our outfitters essentially disagrees with how we're interpreting our policy. And he wrote this email back to us and says, well, your policy, your 2720 says this. And I'm reading it and I'm like, that's not how I interpret our policy. I don't understand. It's okay that we disagree on how to interpret it, but I don't know how he came to that conclusion. And we asked him, he goes, oh, well, that's what AI told me your policy means. And it was like, okay, well, we're defaulting to what the ranger the ranger interprets it, not AI.
Yeah, there's
Thank
always
you.
that you got to be careful with the AI. I actually like it to help me find stuff in there more efficiently, not so much interpret. But yeah, you got to be a
But
little
then,
careful with that one.
yeah, so however you find it, and then
Yeah.
apply your interpretation of handbook and manual. Okay, we'll move on for other trail stuff. In the Forest Service, we've got a awesome SharePoint site for trails. The website's there. Tips and Tools has a ton of specific stuff that's probably going to resonate with this audience well. Matt mentioned earlier the National Technology and Development Program. That's where all those like awesome handbook and or like guidebooks come out. Saws That Sing. I'm trying to remember some of the other. What's the Axe manual called? What do you got in your
Rigging,
hands there?
rigging for trail work manual.
Perfect. Yeah. And oh, I just put it away. We'll get to it here. Also, so the third one here is sign and poster guidelines for the Forest Service. This I use all the time. I don't know about you, Matt. I actually have a printed copy of the relevant chapters because I want to have it on hand to study. The trail crew and I look at it all the time. Gives us the guidelines on how to properly prep our signs, like the naming, numbering conventions, arrows. You're not supposed to have an arrow that goes down, and how to properly sign junctions. We use this one all the time. Standard trail plans and specifications, and yeah, the trail maintenance and construction notebook. This is was out of print for a little while, and it's back in print. I just got some fresh copies. I'm super happy to have it. Everybody that works in my program, when they're new to trails, they read certain sections as a way to help learn how to do the very fundamentals. Matt, you want to point to anything on here
Yeah,
particularly?
I'll just say that the Trail SharePoint site is a wealth of knowledge and is always being updated. Mackenzie does a phenomenal job with the Washington office keeping that updated. There's also calendar on there of trail related trainings and events that are coming up. The standard trail plans and specifications. When we redid the trail maintenance and construction notebook just recently, we actually developed 3D models of a
Oh,
lot of our standard plans. And so now you can go in and look at them instead of just looking at a CAD drawing. You can actually go in and rotate it however you want, and gives you some people's brains a better understanding of how our drainage structures or different trail components are supposed to look on the ground. So there's some cool stuff that's being developed, and we're always improving upon it.
yeah, cool. Thanks. Okay, a few more Forest Service ones. This is where we're starting to get into some maybe not technical well, yeah, I'll just we're getting out there. We're getting out there on some stuff. The Recreation Heritage Visitor Resource Integrated Business System. Okay, that's a mouthful. Yes. That's where we get guidelines on how we manage our trail data, which is important. Maybe not everybody's doing that, but how we manage our trail data, the condition data, inventory, maintenance, background information. And then right behind that is NRM Trail Support, the actual database that we manage all of that data. And it's great to go out and maintain a trail, build a trail, but we want the data so that we can share the information and use that for our best practices. The Forest Service Trail Accessibility Guidelines on how to improve accessibility on trails in appropriate places. Another great example, the National SAW program. Rigging for trail work. You just showed that, Matt, so that's great. But so these are sort of like places to go, like websites is what we're talking about. The last one here is really important. This isn't a website. This is the network, right? This is your human network. In the Forest Service, that would be regional and forest program managers and trail advisory group representatives. But there are subject matter experts no matter what organization you work with. And you can find in your peer network people who can coach you, mentor you on knowledge, skills, and abilities in trails. Matt, would you say anything more for this slide here?
I'll just put a plug in for data. I know it's boring and I've been sucked into the data side of trails, but you can actually learn a lot from the data and looking at it and knowing what you're getting yourself into before you head out on a trail. And then, of course, we're sharing that trail information with the public. And so making sure that data is being updated and accurate is actually getting more and more important as that is becoming more available to the public and being used by more of the third-party apps that are out there pulling in our trail data.
Oh, I got a live example of that. I just had that this morning. A trail partner who maintains a newer trail on our unit here sent me a note letting me know that they had just maintained and cleared the trail. And I went to go share that information, put it on our map that trail, we don't have the map, we don't have that trail on the map yet. Now, and I was like, wait, why isn't it on our map? That trail's a couple of years old. Why isn't it on the map? We do have it in our database. We haven't printed the fresh visitor map yet. But I was for a moment trying to remember if we hadn't even gotten that data in there where the map information comes. So and if a trail's not on the map, is anybody going to find it? Was that maintenance worth it? Anyways, okay, we're going to move on here. There's a couple of other websites to name drop here. Hey, on a really basic level, the public-facing U.S. Forest Service trail, just the trails section of our public-facing website actually could be really informative. Also, our interactive visitor map, you might learn things about trails or better understand how the public perceives the trails that you're working with by how we're showing them on maps. Matt, you mentioned the National Forest and Grassland app. I haven't checked that one out yet. You want to talk
Yeah,
about that a
it
little
was
bit?
just officially released on June 1st. It's kind of did a soft rollout internally a couple months ago, but now it's out for everybody to
Nice.
use. It's really slick. It's great for planning, and it can again gain a lot of knowledge about the trails that are out there. And we're constantly trying to improve our data that shows up there for the public again. And then I'll also talk about the USGS trail mapping tool. It's not a Forest Service product, but we've worked with USGS to incorporate all of our Forest Service trail data. The cool thing about what USGS is doing is they're looking beyond boundaries. They're collecting all of the agency trail data, including down to city, municipality, county, state data, and putting it into one place. And then they've also developed some really cool planning tools on there for like design and layout. And you can also select existing trails and generate elevation profiles. Just a really cool resource that I encourage people to go check out and play around with.
Yeah. So we're getting beyond Forest Service stuff here, but I want to mention one more map. It's not a Forest Service map. And I was just trying to on my screen find the proper name, but I don't want to lose the slide here. I think it's called CalTopo. I just learned about this yesterday from one of our trail contractors here. And he was telling me that because we're kind of negotiating when the project will start. And he was saying, well, I've been looking at CalTopo and there's something in there where weekly it gathers satellite imagery and we're able to determine where snow line is, which is relevant in this situation. Don't want to start the project until you can do the through hike, and there's definitely a high elevation area. And so another map system, not Forest Service in this case. Yeah, thanks, CalTopo. And there's somewhere in there, I got to go explore it, where you can start learning about the where snow line is. Super relevant for trails implementation, right? Okay, let's get out of Forest Service training resources. These are other resources and even your resources. Trail Skills Project, that's sort of the host of the Trail Competencies stuff. I think that got shared earlier. The Interagency Visitor Use Management Program, where you can sort of, the thing I've used most often there in trail stuff is it talks about how to unravel like social conflicts on trails. Maybe a way to do better education or engineering to reduce conflicts. So that's one of the things I think is useful for the Interagency Visitor Use Management package. The National Trails System, if you want to learn more about the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, Nimi Trail, some of the historic trails, some of the scenic trails. You can learn there. And an extension of that is the Partnership for the National Trails System. This is like an aggregator of the people and groups that work to support those national trails. American Trails, this is their bread and butter, right? Promoting good use of trails and best practices for managing trails. Also, the Professional Trail Builders Association, IMBA, the International Mountain Biking Association, giving us great resources on how to do a good job of designing and managing mountain bike trails. Matt, would you say anything here?
I'd just say keep an eye out, get on that American Trails mailing list because they do a phenomenal job
Oh,
with the
cool.
webinars. And the webinars are free to anybody in the agency. I know we've got some folks on here that aren't in the agency, but I think getting access to them is pretty easy if you work with the agency. But yeah, tons of webinars that they do a really good job with. A lot of good skill, got a lot of good knowledge shared there.
Yeah, okay. And AMC's, oh, these are some recommendations, Matt, that you had that must be on your bookshelf. AMC's Complete Guide to Trail Building, Light on the Land, and I've heard of that. It's on my bookshelf. When you brought it, when you sent it over, I was like, oh yeah, I even have that one.
Yeah.
We also want to recognize some of like the Wilderness Skills Institutes, the Ranger Academies. There was just a session on that. Matt and I were just at the Northern Rockies Wilderness Skills Institute and helping with some trails stuff. There's 2 college certificate programs that we're aware of. Isn't that cool? Northwest Arkansas Community College has a certificate. Vermont State University has a trail certificate. Matt, you want to
Yeah.
unpack anything there?
Those can both be done remotely. So like you can
Really?
act, yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure on the Vermont State, I know for a fact the Northwest Arkansas Community College can all be done virtual, and you can get a certificate and pretty good program. We've had some Forest Service folks go through it. We also have a Forest Service like kind of like a grant program to pay for the tuition if you're working the agency to go through that program. So that's cool. And then, yeah, those 2 books that I mentioned at the top, I use those a lot in my career, and I've handed them to a lot of volunteers, partners, crew members. There's just a lot of good information in there, even though it's still an old paper paper book. I know we've shifted so much to digital these days, but I still refer to those books quite often. Mine are all torn up and bookmarked, and I've had them for years, and they're still useful.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for sharing about those certificates that they can be done virtually. I have somebody that I work with here who is probably going to follow up with that. I
Awesome.
know that's going to connect for him. Okay, we're getting close to your ideas. In fact, we are at your ideas, audience. Okay, I'm going to open a different version of this slideshow, and I'm going to start taking notes. We want to hear from you. Perhaps as we were talking here, you started thinking, well, they've missed this, or, well, there's a very practical thing I have on my bookshelf where I took this class. What we want to know is where are you acquiring your knowledge, skills, and abilities so we can add to our list? You can come off of mute. You can put your thoughts in the chat. Totally up to you. And Matt, if you want to keep an eye on the chat a little closer than me while
Sure.
I try to do some screen sharing here.
I know my favorite resource is the National Wilderness Skills Institute. There's some great recordings we have this year. I think we will surpass 200 recordings. So that's way more than 200 hours of training out there. But specifically, we have playlists organized to where you can hopefully find videos a little bit easier. But there's some great like crosscut saws. We have so many crosscut saw trainings around sort of the classroom portion of the training to like how to sharpen it. Dolly had some recorded sessions yesterday that were about techniques on, where you position your body and everything like that. I Some of my favorites also include hand tools and how to use those. We've had some great recordings around that. So.
Cool. Thanks. I got that on there. You're right. The back catalog, all the recordings, there's substantial stuff there.
Yeah. In the chat, we had somebody mention some of the recordings by the Arizona Trail Association. So there's some recordings there, and yeah, they do a great job of putting on trainings in person if you happen to be in the desert Southwest.
Hey, Christy, I'm wondering what's the go-to place for you? Early on you started learning some trail stuff.
I think I think the biggest thing was going to people who taught classes at WSI or taught classes on crosscut or chainsaw and asking to like spend days out with the people who were teachers being like, okay, yeah, next time you're doing this, I'll come out and help you, and then like trying to like gain their knowledge. That's just one way that I uh learn well, and then you can help them with their projects and, learn from them.
Oh, 100% agree. I feel like in the end, I've probably learned the most through the direct exchange of knowledge. It's hard to make a PowerPoint slide out of that.
I know.
But yeah, seeking out instructors or subject matter experts for some direct coaching. It could be after you take a class and say, I want to learn more, I want more practice. Um, or can we just have an ongoing conversation? Um, Completely agree with you on that. Thanks, Christy.
Yeah, I'll second that. On the job training is pretty hard to beat. The other thing I'll say, following up, after you've taken trainings, some of my best mentors are folks that I still reach out to that I took trainings from years ago. And I haven't been on a project or a training with them for a long time, but I don't hesitate to pick up the phone and reach out to them, and uh, still learning from some of those folks that have a lot of experience.
So sometimes when I've mentioned I've done these before, what gets me really excited is when somebody says a podcast. There's some really cool podcasts out there I know in the river world that I was not aware of until I did this. Gear Garage is the river one I'm thinking of, and they have a whole series of just better understanding your river gear, some technical stuff. I'm wondering if there's podcasts out there that would help a trails manager.
This doesn't answer that, but I have the audio version of the full NWSI library that I listen to when I sharpen crosscuts. And,
Oh,
and so I use it as like a podcast format almost.
interesting. Listen to the audio files while you're sharpening your crosscut. Yes. Well, I'm a little Park Leaders Show podcast. Dusty, you put that one in there. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little more about that one?
Just it's one of the podcasts that I kind of check in on if there's a topic in there. Like you might be interested in this, Colter. There was an art in parks episode just a couple weeks ago, but the latest one is about managing visitor experience. It's just retired park supervisor or manager. He interviews various folks, things like that. So there's a lot of episodes in there, so there might be something that interests you.
Cool. I will
Oh, I
check it
know
out.
something I wanted to mention. It was on a previous slide. We talked about PTBA as a reference. I think what a lot of people don't realize, because they call it a conference, they do the Professional Trail Builders Association Sustainable Trails Conference. There's actually a lot of trainings associated with that conference, and a lot of really good hands-on skills can be learned. They do like 3 days before the conference is just dedicated training, and the 3 days after the conference are just dedicated training, and then the conference is kind of in the middle of the week. And there's even like sessions that you can do that I would consider training in there. I know we have some trouble getting there because they call it a conference, but if you really focus on the training aspect of it, there can be a lot of good classes there, and they bounce back and forth between the east side of the country and the west side of the country for the most part. So this year was kind of middle. I think it was in I can't remember if it was Minnesota or Minneapolis now. But that means they'll probably be out west next year and then back towards the east the year after that. So really good training opportunity in there, especially if it's easier to get approval from the Forest Service if you ignore the conference and just go to the trainings. We just have a hard time getting approval for anything with conference in the
Yeah.
name.
I just thought of one here, and it's a specific example, but I think it can be broadened out. We, on my unit, I believe it was 2010, had the Pacific Northwest National Scenic Trail added to the National Trails system, and it bisects part of my unit. And that had been a proposal for designation for a long time. But we weren't tracking that super closely, and in a sense, it kind of surprised us that designation did happen on our unit. That's totally fine. But we hadn't been thinking of the trails that trail follows as through trails. And so we're having to rethink okay, through hikers on those trails, how we might manage that trail a little bit. And I found a book about somebody who hiked it in the 80s as a young man, and it was just like his sort of like musings and experiences on what became the Pacific Northwest National Scenic Trail. But there's a whole chapter about where he travels through the Flathead National Forest and Glacier National Park. And that was super informative to put myself as a trail manager in the headspace of a through hiker. And it was just sort of his biography and his experiences. It's not a technical training resource, but it's a perspective that was informative to my trail management. So I just want to throw that out there. You might explore some of the nonfiction world around the trail resources that you work with. Advancing the Outdoor Professional. Wow. Podcast. I gotta go check that out. And I see Dusty's just added something else. What's Up Interpreters podcast, like how we speak of the resources, the trail, I'm imagining is a part of that. Uh, Lots of podcasts for when you're sharpening the tools. I love the way Christy put that. Keep you thinking, keeping you creative as you're doing some maintenance in the warehouse. Okay, well, I think we're getting close to our wrap-up time here, Matt. Do you want to share any last thoughts here about our exploration?
No, I just appreciate everyone being here and thinking through your KSAs with us.
Yeah. And I would say, I hope this was useful for you, that you plan a future for yourself as a trail specialist. You share what you already know and with others, and that you're charting a course for acquiring additional knowledge, skills, and abilities so that you can be the best trails management person that you can be. Thank you, everybody. With that, I think we'll turn it back to you, Dusty.
Thanks to Colter and Matt for taking the time to be here with us today.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank
having
you,
us.
everybody.